All right, we get a roll on the Krueger Show. NFL draft has come and gone. Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday, all day. All day. Then undrafted free agents. And now, finally, it is time to recap the NFL draft from the Niner perspective. Dieter Kurtenbach from KMBR and the San Jose Mercury News is in the house. We're going to talk some 49er football. Dieter, good to see you, man. How are you?
Exhausted. I'm exhausted, Larry. We've been reading names and giving takes for the last 3 days, and couldn't be more excited to be on with you talking about one of our favorite things, if not our favorite thing in the sporting world. This is what we live for, and I don't really know what to do with my time now that it's over.
Yeah, they say, postpartum depression, and there's things like that. I get a little bit of, well, should I do a mock draft? No. I shouldn't do a mock draft. There's no reason to do a mock draft.
It's never too early to start on 2025, Larry. It's never too early.
Yeah, exactly. But the draft has come and gone, and man, looking at certain teams, whoa, Jorge Soler just hit one to the moon.
Yeah, but are they still down by a run? No, they had a runner on. Ghost runner.
Yeah, it's 4-3.
Wow.
4-3. The Giants wearing the Saturday night unis with the black jerseys, the white pants, the red, orange
coming through. The late inning Giants. They're all Lamont Wade these days.
Jorge Soler going yard.
The power of the sun at night.
But it's funny. You feel like your team. Sometimes some years I don't like the Niner draft. Some years they just pick a bunch of guys. I'm like, wow. And then if you go back and look at their draft history, they've really done pretty poorly in the first couple rounds, but they've done really well in the third day, and it's kind of saved them. And as far as this draft goes, then you look around the league and see who's done what. Just a couple quick thoughts before we get it rolling. I thought Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean both winding up in Philly. Beautiful. I thought that was, real nice by Howie Roseman. I thought he did an incredible job. And I got to say, the Steelers, for years, Omar Khan,
exceptional.
Kevin Colbert was there. Now Omar Khan's there. But, man, it's just like, doesn't matter who's there. They just are the best drafting team. I thought they had an amazing draft.
Yes.
They have other needs, but man, they got Troy Fatanu.
Mm-hmm.
They got Zach Frazier.
Yep.
So in my mind, they got the best tackle ready to roll. They got the best interior guy ready to roll. Then they got the best guard in Mason McCormick, and they still wound up with the Roman Wilson. They also got Peyton Wilson, the linebacker from NC State.
Great value for him there because he has first-end talent with a fifth-round body.
Pittsburgh, wow. And I didn't even look at what they did today, and I haven't really done a deep dive on studied who did what, but just on the Eagles getting those two DBs at the front, and then the Steelers getting those three of my favorite offensive linemen all in one draft. I gotta say those are two huge winners.
I liked what Green Bay did as well. I don't care for Morgan, the offensive lineman that they took, but everyone they took after that was somebody that I'm like, damn, that's pretty good.
Who do they get? Run down some of the guys
they got. They got Hopper. I got to pull it up. I mean, everybody.
Missouri.
Yeah. Who? Listen, on a day 3. You're doing pretty well there. I probably should have had this pulled up beforehand, but
okay.
I just remember going back through the list and just being like, there's no flipping way that they got all of these guys that I really like. Another team that I know did very well because they got one of my favorite prospects in the draft, Tanner Bortolini, is the Colts, who consistently draft at a very high level. Edgerrin Cooper, the linebacker out of Texas A&M, goes to the Packers. You get Javon Bullard, who was unquestionably, in my mind, it wasn't even particularly close. Javon Bullard was the best safety in this draft. Marshawn Lloyd, the running back out of USC, I can see it. I also cannot see it. I mean, I wasn't high on Lloyd, but it's unquestioned he's got some pedigree there. Tyron Hopper, an outstanding linebacker. Evan Williams out of Oregon, who's really versatile and I think has an opportunity to make a real impact on that defense. Jacob Monk out of Duke, good interior lineman. To get him late is good. They got another safety in Kitana Olapodo.
Who's a hitter? The Oregon State guy with the dyed hair.
Big bopper, no question about it. Travis Glover out of Georgia State. He's a guy who got invited to the Senior Bowl like midweek and really stood his own against some really high-end prospects. And the pick that I think that they did the best on, 245, 7th round, Michael Pratt. What the hell was he doing, Larry? What was he doing there, Larry?
I know. Tulane quarterback. A lot of people thought it was going in the 3rd or 4th round.
I thought he was better than Spencer Rattler. Now, I get it. Listen, the draft broke down where you had 6 quarterbacks taken in the top 12 picks. So if you wanted one, you had to go get one. And then they waited until 150 to get Rattler. And I was a big Jordan Travis guy. It didn't surprise me at all that he came off the board at 171. I think that was a great pick for the New York Jets. Michael Pratt should have been the next guy off the board. I know you're a big Milton guy. He goes to the
Austin
Patriots.
Reed, too, a lot from Western Kentucky.
Dude can rip it. I don't know where he ended up going as an undrafted free agent. But the fact is that the Niners had a really good shot to take Pratt. And I think that they missed it with their 6th round pick. I think Pratt would have been an outstanding pickup. You can never have a redundancy at quarterbacks. A lot of people went in on the Falcons for taking Michael Penix. I think they're going to come out looking like geniuses. It might not be tomorrow, might not be next year, but when Michael Penix is in there, they're just going to keep rolling with whatever it is they have. And they have a great insurance policy on Kirk Cousins. That's a team that was a quarterback away. And now whichever direction they go, this year will be Cousins, but in the future with Penix, they're not going to have a quarterback problem. It will be other issues that will hold the Atlanta Falcons back. I think Michael Pratt can be a backup in this league and in the right system, a starter in this league. Backup year 1, a starter in the future. I think having him in the 49ers quarterback room would have been exceptional. I think having him in the Packers quarterback room is a very dangerous proposition for San Francisco, to the point where I might have just taken him just so someone else I know would have liked him, which is probably the Rams, teams that value accuracy above all. Man, it was a good draft for the Packers, and that's a scary thought for the Niners, who I thought had a pretty good draft too.
Penix too. It's like a lot of people are like, well, maybe he might sit for as many as 4 years. Well, God, if that's the plan, I mean, you draft a 24-year-old quarterback and you sit him for 4 years. Yeah. But I do agree. That
sounds like a champagne problem because Kirk Cousins is ripping it. It seems like a good problem to have.
Now you're holding Cousins' feet to the fire, and he comes in with, not just motivation, but, a short leash if Penix outplays him. And there's a chance that Penix outplays Cousins. But you know what? In the NFL, you never have a problem when you have too many quarterbacks. You always have a problem when you don't have enough. If you have too many, then you know what? You'll figure out a way. Somebody will offer you a bonanza for Penix, and you'll move him, or somebody will offer you some package for Cousins because quarterbacks go down and he's not the worst. So they're going to be just fine. And the people that were ripping them, I think, are going to look really bad. I think Penix is going to be really,
he was my number one
really
quarterback.
Good. He's my number one. I was telling Willard and Dibley the other day, they're like, I said, Michael Penix is the best quarterback in the draft. They're like, wait a second, over Caleb?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, I'm not a Caleb. I'm not a Caleb guy. I don't dislike Caleb, but I just think Penix, they played in the same conference.
Yeah.
Penix was better, had a better record, had a better season.
Yeah.
They both had great surrounding casts. So,
I didn't spend a lot of time on the 49ers. Like Jared Kinston, I got a mea culpa right here. And Jake Hutchinson, my co-host on 49ers Game Day, like we knew about him. We didn't dive on him and we missed him. Not just because the Niners took him, but because once they took him and then we're like, I think I know about that guy. And we started looking, we go, oh, this makes all the sense in the world. Like, how did we miss this guy? We missed him straight up. As we're watching USC tape this afternoon, trying to pretend like we knew what the hell was going on.
Right.
I could not get over how poorly coached they were, one, and two, that Williams was just not even running an offense. He was out there playing Madden on easy mode because he has all the physical talent in the world. I did not care for him all that much. I think that the top 3 quarterbacks in this draft are going to be a bust. And I would have taken Penix over all of them, especially if I was the Bears, which is a team that's a lot closer to contending than a lot of people think. They had the number 1 pick. That was Carolina's number 1 pick. They didn't earn the number 1 pick. They earned the 9th pick, and they had a nice defense at the end of the season. Regardless, I like Kingston, the Niners 6th round pick. I really don't like Caleb Williams, and it was reinforced watching this tape. It's like, oh, that's why I don't like him. This dude's hella annoying to watch. They took him 1 overall, so yeah, I would have taken Penix too.
Yeah, I mean, he had some good weapons, man. He had some good weapons, and they didn't play all that well.
Mhm.
And then the nail polish and the crying and I want to own the team and all. He just the guy. I watched his pro day too. It's like people constantly rip Trey Lance for wobbly footballs. This guy threw more wobbles than Trey used to throw. I mean,
Yeah.
and nobody said a damn word about it. It's amazing to me in the NFL how we get to this groupthink thing
Mhm.
where it's just like there is, there's nobody who thinks independently. Everybody thinks the same. And
Yeah.
it's like, if you do think independently, we must stop that and somehow get into,
Yeah.
fall in line with everybody else. It's like,
Instead of
are you telling me
canceling people that
none of
yeah.
these people saw it the way we see it and are like, hey, you know what? Michael Penix is the best. He was the best in Indy. He was the best on the field this year. His team wound up in the national championship game, and they're not one of the they're not one of the halves of college football.
Well, he did have great receiver. He did have a great team at
He had a
Washington
great
this year,
surrounding
no
cast,
question.
great line.
But he
I
also
mean,
elevated them.
and
Roma
you know what?
Dunze was not a first-round pick until Michael Penix started throwing him the ball.
You know what? I think that, and you think that, but like Dave Softy Muller, when I asked him where he thought Penix ought to go, he said middle of the second round. He said, his offensive line really made him this year, and I'm like, I mean, what are you guys watching? I mean, I could not disagree with that more.
I'm
But
glad we're in cahoots, Larry. We got a little group think going between you and I right now on Michael
seriously.
Penix, and I fear for the fact that he's in the NFC legitimately because you're going to pay Kirk Cousins the guaranteed money over the first 2 years. You can move on from him after that. You got to eat a little bit, but it's nothing prohibitive. I think it's like $12 million to eat it. It's effectively void years on the back end of that 4-year contract. It's all front loaded front 2 years. If Penix doesn't, the argument of, oh, well, he's 24, and if you don't play him until Cousins is gone, he's 28. I just find that to be ridiculous. Like, it's a quarterback.
And there's a 2-year out after Cousins.
That's right.
Deal,
Yeah. So
he
like,
could get out.
maybe he's playing at 26. Maybe he's playing at 28. The argument is, oh, well, he's not going to be as good for as long. Forget that. What, you're going to get 12 great years out of him if he's everything we think he's going to be, as opposed to 15? Like, what a shame. No other player in the league can give you 8. It's a quarterback. It's a totally different calculus. Kirk Cousins just got $100 million at age 35 coming off a torn Achilles. Like, it's not
Tom
like other
Brady's
positions.
considering playing, and he's 47.
Exactly. So
yeah,
I don't worry. There's a lot of players, and this was something that, consistently, I'm sure a lot of people who aren't as sick in the mind and care about this stuff as much as we do, were finding out for the first time the last 3 days, hey, these guys are like old as hell that are coming out of the like everyone's 23 and 24. That's the COVID season and free transfers and all that stuff. And that will pare down. Yeah, it will pare down now in the years to come. We'll still get some seniors, and I think that's good for the league in general. I think as much as GMs want to bash NIL and not getting all the players that they want coming out, they're going to be more ready-made players, I think, going into the NFL. I think the NBA would love if they had more guys who stayed in college longer on their own volition as opposed to trying to jump to the league. But as you look at this Niners draft, I think that it also speaks to sort of the landscape, right? You have a lot of guys who played a lot of college football, not necessarily all for the same programs. I think all but one of them transferred. And these are guys who, I think if I had to create a theme for the 49ers draft, it's high floor, perhaps limited ceiling. But these are all guys who you can feel comfortable about going into the 2024 season as somebody who can help you. And maybe not somebody who's going to be a future star outside of, I would argue, pick 31, who I'm all about. And I told you a couple weeks ago, I'm all about him.
Let's get into it. Let's get into the Niners picks. So at 31, a lot of people are thinking, man, they're going to go offensive tackle. They're going defensive tackle.
Me too.
Lynch said it last Monday. Hey, we're going, we really want to emphasize the line of scrimmage.
Mm-hmm.
And then he comes out and they go with a wide receiver from Florida who transferred from Arizona State in Ricky Pearsall. And, the interesting thing I think about Pearsall was the kind of the contradiction or the contrast in the reactions. The fans and a lot of their Niner content creators were ridiculously up in arms, and this is ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. What a wasted pick.
He's just a punt returner, Larry.
Yeah. And
that's what they said.
But the NFL people were way more complimentary. You saw CJ Stroud's reaction. There was a scout that told somebody that I had quoted, and it was an anonymous scout, so take it for what it's worth.
As they all are these days.
Yeah, but I mean that he thinks that Pearsall could catch 100 balls as a rookie. 100.
I said that. I did not know that quote. I said that on the radio on Thursday night.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, let me just give you my quick take, and then I want to hear yours. My quick take is just that I really wasn't counting on this player because I was thinking more about, long term and getting somebody who's like a long term Ayuk or a long term Debo. But the Niners are thinking short term, like we want to have somebody who's super polished who can step in right now. Mm-hmm. And when you factor in Pearsall's ball skills and route running, toughness, and hands, and where he likes to operate in the short and intermediate middle, in some ways, they just gave Brock Purdy the cheat code. They just gave Brock Purdy a guy who, when he rolls right, is going to free himself up, get to a soft spot, put his hands out, and Purdy's going to find him, and they're going to play pitch and catch. And I think this guy's going to be a continuity piece on 3rd and 5 and keep the offense on the field. And I think this is a very effective player. And so I kind of like Pearsall, even though I would have preferred Xavier Legette, who went one pick later, and then maybe even Ladd McConkey, who went a couple picks later the next day in round 2. Mm-hmm. But overall, I think Pearsall is going to be a monster producer for the Niners.
I think this is a situation where the 49ers are going to have their cake and eat it too. I think he's a short-term option, and I think he's Deebo Samuel's long-term replacement at Z receiver, and that starts in 2025. I think that when you had me on and we went for a long time, and we just emptied our mental notebooks on each other. And You asked me at the end of that show, who do I think the best player in this draft is going to be? Draft overall. And I could have said Joe Alt, or I could have said, I really like anybody who would have been taken early, Michael Penix, something. And there was some conviction in my body. Maybe I was just tired and dehydrated. And I said I thought Ricky Pearsall is going to be the best player in this draft. There's something you
did, and people can go check that. That's on my YouTube page. This is our mock draft that Dieter and I did just a couple days before the draft. You were hot on Pearsall. Tell us why.
He catches everything. Polished route runner. Every reason you just sort of laid out. The other thing, too, is there's no stain in his game. I would say that the two things that you would ever have to worry about with Ricky Pearsall is physicality at the line of scrimmage within 5 yards, right? And I think there's a lot of receivers that you can say that with. If you get hands on him, you can knock him off his routes a little. He's not the strongest dude in the world. He's no A.J. Brown. And the other thing is when you get him on choice routes, he consistently takes the inside leverage to the inside of the field, and he rarely tries to push back, even if the hips are telling you or the feet are telling you, go deep, take the 9, go deep on the 7. He'll consistently take the inside, even when he has clear leverage against a secondary. The second one I can write off to a degree. We're going to have to see at the NFL level. I can write it off to a degree in that his quarterbacks at Florida sucked. So if he goes deep, he's not getting the ball. He's not getting the. Why would I make my quarterback's life harder? He can't throw it there. So why am I running there? That's the benefit of the doubt I'm going to give him. On the physicality aspect of it, well, there's another guy who has that problem. His name is Deebo Samuel. And there will be some folks, I'm sure, in the comments section that will get upset with me saying this, but I want to be clear about the nuance of it. Deebo Samuel is one of the great football players I've ever seen with my own two eyes. Football player. Ricky Pearsall is a better wide receiver than Deebo Samuel. He cannot do everything Deebo Samuel can do, but he is a better wide receiver than Deebo Samuel, and I think that might be the case on day one of training camp. What he can do is, if you liked what Brandon Ayuk and Brock Purdy did this past season, and I think back to the Patrick Peterson play week 1 against the Steelers, where Brock ripped one into the front right corner of the end zone, where Patrick Peterson, for the only time all game, was in great coverage, great position, Couldn't have done anything more as a cornerback. One of the great all-time cornerbacks, definitely on his last legs. And Brandon Ayuk, he threw it right to Brandon Ayuk's hip, where only he could catch it. And that started a great relationship on the field between Ayuk and Purdy. They had a connection. There was an understanding. If you get an ounce of space, I'm getting you the ball, buddy. He's going to have that with Pearsall. And he might even have it at a higher level with Pearsall because he's a weapon for you at all three levels. And I think if you put him in a Kyle Shanahan offense that schemes guys open better than anybody else and puts you in a position where you don't have to deal with that physicality at the line of scrimmage on a 5-yard in, especially with the rules these days, I just have a very hard time seeing how he is not going to be the 49ers version of, and it feels like a lazy comparison because they're both white guys, but he's their version of Cooper Kupp. And when you take that one step forward, I think this overall draft has told us that the 49ers, they're obviously building around Brock Purdy. And we can argue if they effectively did that in this draft or not. By not getting a future left tackle, there's an issue there, and we can get into that a little bit later. But they are clearly going to have a more Brock Purdy style offense this upcoming season. And that might include being more like the Rams that we know with Sean McVay than the 49ers we knew with Jimmy Garoppolo as the quarterback, where everything had to be to the middle of the field. This is the first offseason they've had where Brock Purdy can throw a football. I think Kyle Shanahan and him are getting in the lab, and I think we're going to see a different 49ers offense than we've seen the last couple of years. And considering it was the most efficient and prolific offense in the NFL last year, that's a really exciting possibility, and Pearsall's a big part of it.
Yeah, and people, I'm not saying he's better than Cooper Kupp, but he's a better athlete than Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp ran in the 4.6s, and yet still had this quickness and ball skills and hands. And look, he still became one of the best receivers in football, even with his 4.6 40. This guy runs 4.41 and has a 42-inch vertical. And just because he's a Caucasian receiver, we're kind of like, like his athleticism is not real. 4.41 and 42. That. I mean, just
SEC cornerbacks thought the same thing, and look what happened to them.
I mean, and just cross compare those two things. Just go find me all the receivers in this draft that ran 4.41 and had a 42-inch vertical. I bet you it's nobody or maybe one or two guys. Yeah. I mean, those are really, really great athletic traits. So we all kind of slept on those athletic traits. And I was just thinking, of guys like, I'm looking at Xavier Legette going, man, that guy's A.J. Brown. And I do think there's some A.J. Brown elements. I mean, Louis Riddick immediately was like, A.J. Brown. He reminds me of A.J. Brown. So I'm not alone on that.
3 months ago, I put my neck out there, and when we were first evaluating wide receivers, and I go, I really like this Xavier Legette guy, and you're going to hate me for saying this, but I think he's A.J. Brown.
Yeah. I mean, big, strong, fast. So in a way, I do understand the people saying it's low end, because at the end of the day, do I think that Pearsall will evolve into their number one receiver? Well, it's kind of a weird thing. It's like, I can picture him catching 100 balls. I can picture him becoming this Cooper Kupp guy. And if that was the case, I guess you'd have to say that he absolutely could be a number one receiver. But there's something about his profile that says, he's going to be more of a complimentary guy. Like, I think he'd be better on a team that had Ayuk and Debo, and you mixed him in, as opposed to you took away Ayuk and you took away Debo and you said, Pearsall is your number one guy against the number, you're going up against, whatever team, you're getting the Chiefs, you're getting their number one corner. And I don't know if this guy can handle everybody's number one corner. The collegiate production could have been bigger than what it was, but I think a lot of that's explained away by the quarterback. I just think he's a really good player who's going to be really good right away. And I also love the fact that, in his visit and in his phone call words are cheap, but you get to know the players and what they say and the kinds of things that they say and don't say. And I just loved it when he said to Lynch and Shanahan, hey man, you're getting a good one. Because that's like that's like kind of saying like, you know what, I'm damn good and I'm going to prove it this July, as opposed to you drafted me and I'm fortunate. You know what, you got a good one. In other words, I'm going to fight like crazy and work like crazy to fulfill my potential, and I'm going to succeed. And I love that. I love hearing that from the players. I love that ownership of the 100%. Of their experience. And I'm looking forward to him.
He played like it too. this is, I talk a lot about a guy has to have the crazy. It's not the best term, but you understand what I'm talking about. It's not just loving ball and being a film junkie or anything like that. It's about being willing to sacrifice your life for the game and your teammates and putting yourself out there in positions that are going to be not just uncomfortable, but painful in order to make the play for your team. His team sucked. He could have quit on that team so easily because he was clearly the only player that could move the ball down the field for the Florida Gators last year. I know they had some decent running backs. They didn't produce. They weren't good enough. And so this is a guy who, if he didn't have it between the ears, if he didn't have that sort of I love ball temperament, that sort of crazy that I'm looking for, he wouldn't be putting himself in positions as he did countless times to have his spleen be exploded by 4 helmets going into his back. The amount of catches that he made where he took hits that would fell a mortal man, take them down for the rest of the season, the rest of their life, end football careers. Think about the highlight catch that he made against Charlotte. The Charlotte 49ers suck. He was quadruple covered, and the ball is somehow still 10 feet over his head, and he goes up and backhand, one hand, Odell Beckham Jr. catches it, comes down to double contact. Every single time this dude took a massive hit, and it was effectively every time he caught the ball, he popped right back up, do it again the next time. I am in love with his temperament as a football player. Clearly, it extends off the field as well. I mean, he might not be a great quote. He might be a bit of a character. He seems like an interesting cat, but I watch him on the field, man, and he knows what he's doing out there. He got consistently better throughout his college career, and now he is going to an absolutely perfect scheme for what it is he can do. And I think that it is just going to be a beautiful marriage between receiver and offensive coordinator and quarterback. And by the way, from the Phoenix, Arizona area, Niners took 2 Phoenix, Arizona wide receivers, quarterbacks from Phoenix, Arizona. I mean, I don't know what's going on in the Valley of the Sun, but they're not going to lack for the ability to do some off-season work because I imagine these guys are going to be around each other 365 days a year.
I'll push back even more because there were people that told me, hey, man, they let the Chiefs get up and get Xavier Worthy. I love Xavier Worthy, don't get me wrong, and I love watching anybody that fast, and he's got impact speed, but I'm concerned about the durability. And also when you're watching Xavier Worthy, he makes his tape is very revealing. He runs go patterns along the sideline. Mm-hmm. The Niners with Brock Purdy don't throw the go pattern along the sideline route that often. No. You want guys who succeed in the middle of the field, who have ball skills and, can run routes and feel the soft spot in the zone. I mean, I know Xavier Worthy is big and fast, but he ran that time at 164 pounds. So I kind of question the durability. I think this guy, believe it or not, Pearsall, is more perfectly suited to play with Brock Purdy than Worthy, who has huge speed. But, is Purdy going to air it out down the sideline to Worthy? And then, to me, the injury risk, and then you factor in Pearsall and what he can do in the middle of the field. I think Pearsall's the perfect weapon for Brock Purdy. I think it's going to show. I think it's going to show right away.
I think there's something to be said about Xavier Worthy. He works very well for what I think Kansas City needs. They already signed Hollywood Brown this offseason. They clearly just need someone to do what Tyreek Hill did. No one's going to be Tyreek Hill, but just take the top off the damn defense. Run the 9 route. Run that deep 7. Like just go and get the safety to pay attention to you so that Travis Kelce can do his work underneath, so Rashee Rice can do his work underneath. They had to play an entire season of football where the safeties just kept creeping down and creeping down and creeping down, and they still won the Super Bowl. Imagine what happens when they get that deep threat back, and they'll have 2 good options there. But Worthy didn't make any sense because I think he was the 3rd best receiver on Texas this past season. And that's not to say the 3rd best receiver on a great team like Texas isn't NFL draft worthy or first round worthy, but it's just to say he wasn't the go-to guy there. And I want to be able to see what you can do with high volume as opposed to these high athletic traits. If I'm going to put the faith of my franchise and my quarterback in your hands. And one step beyond that, you have to think about the need here. And the need for the 49ers isn't X receiver, the guy who's actually outside. The Niners run really tight splits. Do I prefer Pearsall in the slot A traditional slot role? Absolutely. Because I don't want him to have hands laid on him at the line of scrimmage. It's the one knock on his game. And if you put him in the slot, he gets a nice running start and he can make somebody miss with his open field elusiveness. But the 49ers run tight splits, and they oftentimes keep the Z as almost a flanker wide receiver. So effectively, your number 2 wide receiver, for a lot of other teams, he's outside by the numbers too. He's an outside receiver. The number 2 receiver for the 49ers is effectively a slot receiver. And that's what Deebo Samuel has been. And that's the guy they're trying to replace. They've been trying to trade him for weeks. I know that there's been a lot of buzz as of late. I was under the understanding about 6 weeks ago that he was going to be a Baltimore Raven and that there was a deal in place, and it fell apart. I don't know where. I don't know where. Maybe my info was bad in the first place, but they have been actively trying to trade Deebo. They're going into a lame duck season with Deebo because after this season, as we've talked about before, they're going to have to make some serious cuts as to make room for Brock Purdy under the salary cap. Deebo Samuel is an obvious replacement. They didn't restructure his contract in any way, so they're eating $28 million on the salary cap this upcoming season. If they believe Deebo Samuel was going to be with this team in the future, he would have been restructured. If they wouldn't be trying to trade him, and if they did try to trade him, they would have done it well before April 1. I just think that in the short term, he comes in, he's a really good option. He can play all 3 of the spots that you need a wide receiver to play for the 49ers. I think those 3 spots are going to be used more frequently than in the past when they were a 2 wide receiver team. I think they're going to spread it out more with Brock Purdy in this upcoming season and beyond. And I think he can replace Jennings in the slot. I think he can fill in for Deebo at Z. And I think he can play X with Brandon Ayuk if he misses any time. And then down the line, he's your Z. He's your number 1 go-to Z. And that's when the production really ramps up because Ayuk's going out. He's got one-on-one on the sideline. The safety's going to have to come and pay attention to him because heaven forbid he gets over the top on you. And Pearsall is going to go to work. Going to go to work on the middle of the field, going to go to work on those quick out routes, going to go to work. And if you need to move the ball, he's got 7 yards for you every single time, no matter what. The same way that they rode George Kittle for 2 straight years, they're going to ride Ricky Pearsall in the future. He's a perfect fit for the Kyle Shanahan passing offense, which I think is going to be a lot more dynamic, a lot more interesting, and a lot more Rams-like moving forward. You need a guy like Ricky Pearsall to hold the fort because they didn't have anyone who could play Z wide receiver last year when Deebo Samuel went out.
Purdy to Pearsall is going to be maddening to defend for opposing defenses.
No doubt.
That right there is going to open things up for the speed that they have. And they've added more speed today. And we'll talk about that. All right, let's get to round 2. Renardo Green. I love this pick.
Agreed.
I really love this pick. And this guy, talk about a guy who was misgraded by the mock draft community. Most of the draft guides, most of the mock drafts had this guy in the 4th or 5th round. And so I
did talk to some teams who agreed with that, but I also talked to a guy who I really trust in the league and has been really accurate. And he goes, this guy should be a first-round player. Now, somewhere in the middle, we find
first-round confidence. He plays with a swagger, which is what I love about him is just that he plays with the confidence. If you watched him going up against the LSU receivers earlier this year, those guys are high first-round picks, and
tape. It's great.
Yeah, he just looks like, hey, you know what? I'm every bit as good as you. He can play inside.
Down Malik Neighbors.
He can play outside. Lynch said, you know what? We feel like he's kind of like Demo. He can play inside and outside. I also think that, if they get into a pinch, this guy potentially, since he has experience at free safety, he could play the deep middle. They've added other people in that regard, but I think he can play the deep middle. I just like the swagger of Renardo Green. He's got good size. Even though, people look at, he still weighs in the 180s and they're like, is he big enough? But he's physical. He's physical. He hits. This guy plays the run. He sets the edge. So, sometimes you got to, there were some really, really, not physical corners in this draft. Nate Wiggins, my son's a big fan of Nate Wiggins from Clemson. He weighs 165 pounds. He looks like he has no interest in hitting anybody. Renardo Green, on the other hand, really looks like he wants to lay the hammer and really play the run. I love some of the interviews he did. He's incredibly cocky and confident, which is what you absolutely have to be a top-tier corner.
That's right.
I love the Green pick. I think Green's going to be able to step in. They needed a corner, but they really needed a corner who's ready to play and can play inside and outside and is potentially a starter.
Mhm.
And that's what they got. I think Renardo Green's a starter on the corner and maybe a starter long-term at free safety.
I don't know if he'll end up being a starter. I honestly don't see it as much with the nickel or the safety. He can play him. There's no question he can play him. But I think I'm very interested to see what defense the 49ers actually run. They have certainly made it publicly clear, and we'll see if it turns out to be real come training camp, that they want to go back to the classic cover three, that they want to put the umbrella of three guys up top. And if that's the case, then this is an A-plus pick following an A-plus pick, because Renardo Green, he's a little handsy. It's a little handsy, but
He
nobody
had a bunch of penalties. See, that's the only downside, is he did have a bunch of penalties.
But nobody in this draft outside of the hyper elite, outside of the kid from Toledo, and you'll have to forgive me, Larry, a lot of my names are now just Quinion Mitchell. Outside of him and the top guy from Alabama, nobody has a better transition from squared up to ride, just Velcroing you. And people go, well, he had one interception. Well, he had 13 pass breakups last year. I don't care if he intercepts the ball. He needs to make sure that the receiver that he's covering doesn't catch the ball. That's his job. And especially in a cover three, that's your job. I think this is a brilliant pick. Agree with everything you laid out. The versatility is there. I think you stick him at the second corner spot, and I think he is a starting corner for this team. He could be as soon as week one. I think almost certainly he will be halfway through the season once he gets his feet under him. The transition to the pros is tough, even for the most confident and best. Florida State produced nothing but dudes this year. I mean, even for them, it might be tough. You just never know. Moving across the country, all that stuff. You want to give some deference. But I think Renardo Green is playing when we're in crunch time of the season as a starting corner. I think he thrives. And it wouldn't shock me at all if he's the number one corner on this team a year from now, as they decide to move on from Mooney Ward, because Renardo Green was just so damn good, they can afford to do it. And again, they're going to have to make some cuts down the line. This is sort of the last go around with the core that we know and love, because we've already seen Eric Armstead leave. There's going to be more guys to follow suit, where the Niners say, we're not going to pay you as much as we want to pay you. You want to walk, or do you want to hang around on a cheaper contract? Mooney Ward is a guy who could be very much in that camp. I think Renardo Green is going to be an outside corner for the 49ers. And I think he's going to be a spectacular one. And I'll be very blunt about this, Larry. I hated most of the corners in this draft. I thought that there was a lot of guys, and they all sort of look the same. It's a very difficult position to evaluate from our vantage point without having prodigious access to all 22. Luckily, Florida State was a high enough profile team that I was able to get a lot of all 22 from them. He was a guy who consistently stayed atop the board. Whereas you look at some guys and you go, oh, I really like this tape. And then you watch another one and you go, this guy actually kind of sucks. And Renardo Green, you can't find a bad game that he played for Florida State at outside corner. And I appreciate that the Niners like the versatility. It's a good thing to have, but he's going to be on the outside, and you're never going to think about him again. He's not going to be this sort of dude who's out there, DeRon Bland getting 8 interceptions. He's not going to take risks. He might get a couple of handsy penalties, but by the way, things get a little easier in the NFL in that regard. Charvarius Ward has the same problem. A lot of cover three corners have the same problem. When he gets onto you, he stays onto you. I don't care what the athletic numbers say. I saw him on Malik Neighbors' hip every single snap, and Malik Neighbors is about as good a wide receiver prospect as you've had in the last 10 years. If not for Marvin Harrison Jr., we'd be talking about him in more exalted tones. 64, great pick.
Yeah, straight dog. That's what he is. He's straight.
Yeah,
a straight dog. And Florida State has some incredible talent.
Unreal.
So their practices, he's practicing against NFL receivers.
Getting Keon Coleman every day in practice. That's going to get you good.
Who's physical and not necessarily super fast, but very physical and a great route runner. So, I mean, he's tested. I think he's tough. I love that swagger, but he even said it. He's like, hey, man, these guys are like me and I'm like them. And it's true. The Niners have a bunch of dogs on D, and he's definitely one of them. All right, let's get to the third round. They finally addressed the offensive line with Dominic Puni. Yeah. And this was a kid who didn't start at Kansas. He finished up at Kansas as a grad transfer, but man, he had a phenomenal year this year. Run blocker, pass blocker, violent guy, very physical. He's played left tackle. He's played left guard and he's played right tackle. The interesting thing is if there's an opening, it probably appears to be at right guard, which he doesn't have necessarily experience playing. But what do you think? Is Dominic Puni a good enough player that day one they say, you know what, Feliciano, Burford, you guys sit it out, and it's going to be, left to right, Trent, Banks, Brendel, Puni, McKivitz. How do you see Dominic Puni's draft pick? And they're very conservative with how they play their young players, but they not always. I mean, then there's Burford 2 years ago, and they threw him right in there. Is Puni, do you think, ready to play right guard and be better than those two guys day one, and he's a day one starter? Or do you think this is a long-range play? How do you see Puni's ascension to the NFL?
I don't see a lot of upside with Dominic Puni, but what I do see is a very high floor. And with both of the offensive linemen that the Niners took, it's evident that they are hell-bent on sticking with what it is they value. And what they value is the lower half. Because Dominic Puni, I'm not really sold on him as a pass protector. I'm really not. I think he gets stood up too much. I think he plays a little bit too high. But he is a really good run blocker at tackle and at guard, both sides of the line. And that's what the 49ers love. I think he's a fluid mover without having elite traits in that regard.
He's versatile, too. He can play a bunch of spots.
That's right. And I think that that's the biggest thing. The Niners now have their backup, I'm going to say, at every single spot on the offensive line. The more I have thought about it, the more I have watched this guy. And you'll have to forgive me. There is a little bit of bias here because I am a Missouri Tiger, and I hate saying nice things about folks from Kansas. Kansas had an exceptional football season. They had a lot of really good players. That physically hurt me to say. I felt something twinge in my body, and I'm going to have to do some penance for that. Regardless, this is a guy who is your swing tackle. Right. He is a very viable option at right guard, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if he started at right guard this season. And I think he has a chance to be a really, really good center because of that fluidity in his motion and his understanding of angles. He has a great left to right movement where he doesn't have that great, straight line movement that the Niners so value in tackles. I think his ability to, I think he's clearly a very smart player. He's a player that is violent when he gets out. That's what they love. They love guys who can strike. And at guard,
they love foot speed. Yeah, foot speed.
Yeah, they love foot speed. But on the interior, you don't need that 40-yard dash time because he doesn't have it. You do want it at tackle. They don't have it there. He doesn't have it. But on the interior, what you need is someone who can really go left to right in a smooth, effective fashion. He can get to the spot on that one technique, on that three technique, and knock him off his line. This guy does have that ability because I don't love his hands when he's engaged in pass pro, but he has a great strike, a really good strike, and he has big hands. And in the run game, he's a monster. The Niners are basically taking here a better version of Colton McKivitz. And I know that might trigger some Niners fans. They really believe in Colton McKivitz. Clearly, they didn't draft his replacement. And beyond that, they really believe in a lot of the things that Colton McKivitz does as a fundamental requirement for playing on the 49ers offensive line. I think we've been spoiled by Trent Williams, who can do everything at the highest level known to man. And everybody else, you have to kind of take some hits. You got to eat your vegetables a little bit here because there's not going to be a perfect guard option for them. What they value is that mobility, that ability to hit at the right angle, left to right. This guy really has it. And again, I think even at 6'5", he could be a very, very good center, knowing what the Niners value at that position, which is smarts and the ability to get left to right in a very fluid, efficient manner. So I don't necessarily love the pick at 86. I called it a C because we're going to have to wait and see what he's about. But he gives them a lot of options, and he's someone who can really help in 2024. And on the interior, they can use all the help they can get.
So you see him as an interior guy. He's a guard, 100%. Right?
Yeah, but he can play tackle in a pinch. This is not your future right tackle. This is not your future left tackle. But hey, a guy twists an ankle. I prefer him to Jalen Moore. I do.
Isn't that interesting, though, that the Niners, who, everybody thought tackle was a primary need, they really did not draft a tackle in this draft.
No, they did not.
Not even later. The guy later is more of a center, I think, as well. So
what that tells me, Larry, is that as much as we've talked and folks that I trust have talked about, hey, maybe this is the last year of Trent Williams. It tells me that the Niners either are completely did draft malpractice here because, by the way, Renardo Green's pick could have been Kingsley Suamataia, a guy that I loved out of BYU. They literally traded him to the Kansas City Chiefs.
Right.
They said Kingsley Suamataia is the last viable.
I didn't love him as a run blocker, so I'm not. It doesn't bother me.
It's fair. It's fair. Listen, we can all have different opinions on it. I was a big Kingsley guy, and I think that with a year with Chris Forrester, he could have turned into something really special. And I'm interested to see what happens in Kansas City. But the Niners saw him on the board, knew that that was the guy they kind of had to take, given the way the draft has gone, and Rosengarten having just gone before that. And they said, "Nah, we're going to get an extra 5th round pick," which they then used to go up and get somebody else. We're going to say no to Kingsley Suamataia. We're going to go interior. So it tells me that they think Trent Williams is playing another 2 years because he has 3 years play of remain on his contract, whatever that sentence was. He has got 3 years that they're going to pay him to play before some void years kick in. You have to, especially when you look at the way they've drafted, they're very much thinking about 2025. They want guys who can help in 2024, but they need the base of a 2025 depth team here. And they didn't get a tackle. So that tells me that, one, they trust McKivitz more than the fan base does. I'll side with the fans on this one. And that they trust that Trent Williams is going to be out there for 17 games for the next 2 years plus playoffs.
Seems like a big risk. It seems like they've ignored their primary need, but we'll have to see. I do like McKivitz as a guy. I do a lot of interviews with him.
It's a great guy.
I do think he's a tough guy. I do think he's a smart guy. I think he's serviceable, but I'm not a Brendel fan. And Brendel's still sitting there starting at center. And to me, I thought there was a chance they would draft 3 or 4 offensive linemen and really build a wall around Purdy. Mm-hmm. They chose to kind of go a different route by giving Purdy more weapons. But I don't know if that wall has been constructed yet. So that we're going to have to wait and see. Let's jump to day 2 because day 2, the Niners historically get better on day 2 and day 3. And I thought they did in this draft as well. I really love the drafting of Malik Mustafa. I think was he the first pick today? Malik Mustafa.
He was at 124. Malik Mustafa, who
and
was my number 2 safety on the board.
To me, this is the pick that came from Dallas for Trey Lance, and I centered on this guy a while back. Now, what made me nervous about this draft is I felt like, man, the 49ers need definitely 1, maybe 2 safeties. Mm-hmm. And there's only like maybe 10 or 12 safeties that I like in this entire draft,
That's more than I had.
And here's a guy who had an 87.5 run defense grade this year, 15th among Power 5 conference safeties. Mm-hmm. He's 5'10", 210, but he's really, really a good player. Big 0 penalties over 4 seasons. He's got special team experience. He's a ridiculous hard hitter. I mean, this guy, he was 96th percentile in run defense. He was 95th in run stop defense, PFF. 90th percentile slot coverage. Yeah. But what I love is he's smart. He's a competitive player, and he is a thumper. This is the violent hitter who's coming downhill in a hurry to destroy you. He's the team captain. He's an explosive hitter. I think this is what you get when you marry, great athleticism and great production. You wind up with Malik Mustafa, and I think they were really fortunate. I thought this guy was going to go maybe late 3rd, and he was there for them in the 4th round, and they pulled the trigger. I think this was one of their best draft picks.
An absolute coup for them. And I think that the knock is when you think about a safety who's taken in the 4th round who really lays the wood the way that Mustafa does, because when he hits you, you go backwards. It's not one of these, I'm going to drag you for another yard or we're just going to stand each other up. You go backwards. I don't care if you're 150 pounds or 271. When he hits you, you get hit. And I think the concern is in this modern game where it is so much about covering space as opposed to laying it on a guy, especially in the college game, though the ACC not as extreme in that regard as other conferences like the Pac-12 and the Big 12. The concern is, he won't be able to cover anybody. His ability to recover when the play is behind him is preternatural. It's a very weird thing to know, but like they put him in the mix so many times at Wake Forest. He was so often having to react to stuff that was happening behind him and go clean that up as well. And I don't know if I've seen a player at the college level who could do it the way Malik Mustafa could. I think that he can play free safety for you easily, but there's no question that he should be playing strong safety, especially in a cover 3 where you can bring him into the mix. I don't think that we're ever going to go back to the era of Cam Chancellor effectively playing Sam linebacker with a cover 3 because of the way that nickel is working these days and all that. But man, it's really fun to think about what he can do, because as much as folks love Talanoa Hufanga, and there's plenty of reason to love him because he does a lot of the same stuff that Mustafa does in terms of being committed and attacking and instinctual against the run. That playmaking ability that you just can't teach is the same thing that Mustafa has that Hufanga has. He's a much better coverer than Hufanga, who, by the way, his contract's almost over. And they were starting to waver on him before he tore his ACL. This is his replacement. He might be his replacement as soon as week 1. And it does give now Brandon Staley, who does like versatility and running his shadow defense, is what I imagine is going to be happening, the shadow government of Brandon Staley. I think there's a really good possibility that the 49ers put 3 safeties on the field with Jair Brown as the free safety and having basically a big dime. They used to do big nickel, where they'd have, DJ Reed go in, and they had a couple of different guys that they would try as a slot corner, but he was actually a safety. Diamador Lenore is the slot. There's no question about that. You stick them there. That's his best position. He was great in it last year. But with the way that the league is being spread out in more and more 4 wide receiver sets, I don't think you need to throw another corner on the field and say, go cover the inside. I think you put Mustafa on him, or you let Hufanga sort of play that linebacker role that he's always been meant to play. You can go 3 safeties on the field with these guys, and I don't think you give up anything in the run game, despite the fact that you're a little bit smaller. And I think you dramatically improve your pass coverage and your blanketing of the field overall. There's just no doubt in my mind that Malik Mustafa is going to be an impact player for the San Francisco 49ers. And he's got to be one of the guys that they looked at. I mean, can you only imagine how much John Lynch loved his tape? I mean,
yeah. I mean, he's a thumper, just like John. The other thing, he can play the deep middle in the cover 3. He can be the field safety if you need him to be.
That's right.
I just think also the Niners, just when they lost Mosley and when they lost Jimmy Ward, they lost a couple of their alphas. They gained in Green and Mustafa a couple of alphas in the secondary. That to me is vitally important. These guys are going to step in, and they're going to contribute right away. Yeah. Let's get to the next pick, because the Niners then were in the 4th round. They had another 4th round pick coming up, but they decided to shop both of their 5th rounders to the Jets, and they moved up in round 4 for Isaac Guerendo, a running back from Louisville, who's really interesting. He's been playing in Jeff Brom's zone read offense, and I think it's interesting from the standpoint of Tony Pauline came out with this about 3 weeks ago, that the 49ers were interested in taking Isaac Guerendo in the 3rd round. And then he put that out on Twitter, and then like less than 10 hours later, he took it down. And so I'm thinking to myself, well, wait a second. So does that mean that they're not interested in Guerendo, or did that mean that somebody from the Niners called Tony and said, "Hey, Tony, could you do us a favor and take that down?" My guess is it's the latter. And so I was banking on the Niners having some interest in Guerendo. Guerendo's a really interesting prospect. Let's talk about him for just a second. He's 6 feet. He's 221 pounds. He was born in Indianapolis. His dad Mario's from Central Africa. He got a job at teaching, I believe, at IUPUI or whatever in Indiana there. And so the kid grew up in Indiana. He ran track, he played basketball, he played football. He went to 2 different high schools. He was named Indiana's Mr. Football as a wide receiver.
That's right.
Ran the 100 meters in high school, the long jump, 3-star high school recruit, goes to play for Paul Christ at Wisconsin. And part of his 2018 class, spends 5 years at Wisconsin, 4-time academic All Big Ten, got his degree in finance, and then transferred this last year to Louisville. Ran a 1.54 10-yard split, 4.33 at the combine at 221 pounds.
There's only one other guy in the last 20 years who's been able to run a 4.340 at 220 pounds. Can you name him?
God, I saw this earlier today too, and I don't remember who it was.
It's DK Metcalf.
DK Metcalf.
The biggest, fastest, strongest dude in the NFL. The one that everyone goes, well, that's a different thing. This guy is as fast and as big, and you're letting him carry the ball. This is Raheem Mostert on steroids, man.
Yeah, I mean, he's patient between the tackles. He can catch the ball well. He blocks well. He's only got 2 career fumbles.
That's right.
So that's something Shanahan loves. He averaged over 22 yards on his kick returns. Yep. But he's been, whether it was at Wisconsin or even at Louisville, he's never been a starter. He's a career backup in college. He only recorded 17 offensive touches one time in 41 college starts. Mm-hmm. He's also had some hamstring problems, and he is 24. He also had a Liz Frank injury, but it was a couple years ago.
That's right.
He only has 300-yard games in his entire college career. Mm-hmm. But his last game was the one that I saw this year, which was SC in the Holiday Bowl. And the guy ran for 161 yards and 3 touchdowns in that Holiday Bowl and looked amazing.
Yeah.
I guess my question is he a straight line track and field? Does he not play to the 4.33? He never was a starter. What role do you see him? Or and I have no sources on this.
Okay.
But I see him as a guy that could be a totally dynamic new look for the Niners if he put on 5 pounds and replaced Juszczyk. If suddenly you played this guy at fullback, and now you have a guy that runs, you've got Debo and you've got Ayuk and you've got Pearsall and you've got Kittle and you've got CMC, and now you throw, Garendo in for juice, and you throw him the ball in the flat. And because everybody else is getting coverage, you've got one guy guarding you. He makes one guy miss, and he's 4.33 in the open field. I mean, to me, playing him at fullback might be the mismatch that makes this offense even that much more dynamic. What do you think?
I think it's a great idea. I think as of right now, Elijah Mitchell doesn't have a job. And I think that Isaac Guerrero, you can say, oh, well, he's straight line speed. I can think of Garendo. Apologies. I keep saying it that way. Apologies. Isaac Garendo. I hope it's Isaac and not Isaac.
It's Isaac.
Regardless, Raheem Mostert was straight line speed.
Yeah.
That worked out great. I mean, not everyone could be Christian McCaffrey. And I do think that there's something to be said for, well, he didn't have a lot of production in college. The college game asks for a lot more of that bounce around left, right. They don't love straight line speed, especially at the running back position. They love it on the outside where they can just throw a nine ball. But that's not what the college running game is about when it's so spread out. That's just not their game. It should be, but it isn't. And it's definitely not Jeff Brom's game. So that was kind of a weird transfer for him. For a smart guy, that was not a great move. Regardless, I think that this is the kind of power running back that the 49ers have needed, well, for a couple of years since Elijah Mitchell has not been able to stay on the field.
I think he's a short yardage goal line guy.
Well, he can be at that weight for sure, to the point where you think he can play fullback. And it's hard for me to disagree with that because it's a really fun concept. But this is the spelling of Christian McCaffrey. Think about where Christian McCaffrey was in the playoffs, in the Super Bowl. He was gassed. They kept him on the field so he could get that touchdown consecutive record, all this stuff. And he didn't have anything left in the tank by the time they got to the biggest games of the year. And one of the reasons was because every time Elijah Mitchell came on, and that's the only other running back Kyle Shanahan trusted to carry the ball. I mean, we both like JP Mason. Kyle Shanahan doesn't. So we got to move on. Every time they'd bring Elijah Mitchell onto the field, well, he'd get injured for 2 weeks. I loved those Monday press conferences on the conference call where they'd be like, yeah, we really liked him. Elijah, he came in for about 10 carries. He's going to miss the next 2 weeks with another injury. We don't really know what it is yet.
He's got a bruised quad. He'll be out for 4 weeks.
you have to move on from him. He's a wonderful player. He's had some great times for the Niners. He was here for a good time, not for a long time. And Garendo is the kind of guy who can immediately spell him. He can give Christian McCaffrey a couple of series off. You think about 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter and you're trying to run down the game, trying to shorten it up. Here's Isaac Garendo for you. One cut and go. Maybe the best one cut and go back outside of Trey Benson in this draft. You think about those drives that Kyle loves so much, that penultimate drive of the second quarter where you're trying to stretch it out so that maybe they can't even push the ball down. You get like 30 seconds left at the end of the second quarter. So you get the ball. You got to take a knee at the end of the second quarter. And then the Niners get the ball back to start the second half. That's Isaac Garendo time. And it gives Christian McCaffrey an opportunity to take a beat, get his legs under him. And by the way, now you can use him in more versatile ways because he doesn't have to explicitly be a running back because you now have a running back that you can trust and be on the field. As I said earlier, he's Raheem Mostert on steroids. The Niners at this point in the draft were 4 for 5 in terms of picks that I absolutely loved. And I don't have that many negative things to say about Puni, but like A picks. And I can see why they traded 2 fifth-round picks for this guy. Perfect scheme fit. And by the way, if he turns into that fullback, Larry, what a spectacular prediction and what a spectacular future that would be for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, it could just make the Niners incredibly dynamic. All right, let's go to Jacob Cowing because this is a really good pick. Really? This guy's been working out with Ricky Pearsall in Arizona. He was picked number 135. He's 5'8", 5'9", about 165 pounds, born and raised in Arizona. His dad started at Long Beach Poly. He went to Maricopa High School there in Arizona. He played basketball, track, football, and then, set the school record for the 100 meters, for the 200 meters, was only a 2-star high school recruit out of high school. And, UTEP was his only FBS offer. So he went there and he led UTEP in receiving in 3 years in a row. Then I guess became a dad in 2018, had a son named Chase who was born in 2019, who's named after Chase Lucas, the Niner corner.
That's right.
Who played at ASU. So obviously Cowing and Lucas are buddies. He named his son after Lucas, and now they're both on the Niners. That's interesting. Then Jacob transferred from UTEP to Arizona to be close to his son because he was living in Chandler, Arizona with the girlfriend, I believe. Yeah. And so Jed Fish brought him to Arizona. And this kid's a high character guy. Yes. His NIL thing was with the Boys and Girls Club. He was the bowl game offensive MVP. He's a slot wide receiver with explosive track speed. He's a try-hard blocker. He was also a punt returner at Arizona. He had 13 touchdowns at Arizona, led them to a 10-win season. This guy separates on vertical routes, and you can see it on the film. Only FBS player who had 85 receptions in each of the last 2 years. And he's the only FBS player this year who had at least 90 receptions and at least 12 touchdowns. Yeah. So the production is there.
No doubt.
He's a smaller guy. He's got a 1.52 10-yard split, a 4.38 40, was 4.41 at the combine, 4.38 at the pro day. So this is a burner. This is a very fast, small receiver who runs good routes and is coming off of an incredibly productive year. I like it just from the standpoint there were lots of small guys who ran great 40s in this draft, but hardly any of them had the good route running and ball skills that Cowing has. Cowing has a little bit better ball skills, a little bit better route runner, and 4.38 speed. Yeah, where there were a bunch of guys who had 4.3 speed. Even 4.2 speed.
Loaded on slot receivers who could run fast.
Lots of guys. Tyler Harrell and Gould and Bub Means and all these guys ran.
Kid out of Tulane, Jackson.
Yeah, a lot of guys running in the 4.3 range, but none of them had the ball skills or the route running of Cowing. So I like Cowing. I think, I don't know how he's going to get on the field. Maybe, Juwan is the big slot receiver, and Cowing's the small, shifty slot receiver. But this guy is a good receiver, so I kind of like it.
A couple thoughts on him. One, I thought it was a little rich of a pick, if I'm being honest, but the Niners don't care about that kind of stuff. They take the guys that they love, and they don't care what the outside consensus is. Good on them. No problem with that whatsoever. If we learned anything in this draft, it's that mock drafts and all that. So they don't know. We don't know what the hell we're talking about. We're guessing. And
well, everybody's board is different.
Totally.
Even if you and I were both NFL personnel people for different teams,
right,
we would have had a different board. And I guarantee
you have to go with your board. Yeah. Don't let external opinion on who you should take. You have a lot of good opinions that you pay good money to in-house. Listen to those opinions, not what some guy on a mock draft that you've never met and probably has never talked to you actually thinks. But again, I was a little bit surprised here. And I'm not going to lie, I hadn't spent as much time on Cowing as I had on other receivers because, as you said, he's pretty strictly a slot guy. Though I will say Andrew Hawkins was about 5'8" and had over 100 catches for Kyle Shanahan as an X-receiver at one point in Kyle Shanahan's coaching career. So something to think about there. Maybe they can push him out there. He gets open, as you said, he gets open every single time on those short routes. And if I'm Kyle Shanahan and I'm thinking about what my offense is going to be, because I think they've taken a step back on defense. So now you go, well, they had the best offense in the NFL last year. Where do they go from here? And I think there's one spot where you start looking and you say, well, who else had a good offense? Well, Bobby Slowick had a really good offense in Houston. His rookie quarterback led the NFL in passing yards. What did they do? Well, they run a lot of deep routes these days. And a lot of those deep routes are thrown to a guy named Tank Dell, who I don't know if Tank Dell's as tall as this guy. Tiny little dude. But he has a great catch radius, great ball skills, tenacious, kind of a mean SOB. Tank Dell was a revelation for them this past season. And that's probably why they went in the fourth round. I'm not saying this guy is Tank Dell. I'm saying you can imagine a circumstance in an offense like Kyle Shanahan's, which has used Marquise Goodwin before, which wanted Danny Gray to be an over-the-top guy. He can easily replace Ronnie Bell. They bring back in Trent Taylor, very much of the same ilk at the very low end. Like, this guy's better than Trent Taylor today. And Trent Taylor's an NFL caliber wide receiver. He's been on a bunch of different teams and has played for all of them. This guy's better than him. And he has the ability, as you said, with the deep ball, on top of just constantly being open. If you need 5 yards, much like with Pearsall, if you need 7, he's going to give it to you. If you need 5 yards on those just quick cuts, left or right, he's got them for you. He's separated. You cannot give this guy an inch of space off the line of scrimmage. He's going to take it and he's going to abuse it. He's grown on me. I am concerned, though, about where he fits in 2024, because now they have, with Pearsall and Juwan Jennings, slot receivers, they have to probably give Bell another fair shot at this thing, though they can cut him at the end of preseason.
It's probably going to be a receiver trade at some point, I would imagine, right?
Yeah. I mean, Danny Gray's out of a job. We knew that, but they are kind of low. They might have a bit of a redundancy as that clear-cut third wide receiver, guys who are strictly slot, for a team that, again, I think is going to use more slot receivers than in the past, but still is not going to be like the Arizona Cardinals. They're not going to go out here looking like they're playing Big 12 football all the time, even though they're going to increase the number. This is one of the most interesting players when it comes to rookie mini camp and when it comes to training camp, because I can see him being a revelation and just like, wow, he's just always open. How does he always get so open? He has a knack for it, right? The production's no fluke. And he ran a very pro-style offense for Jed Fish at Arizona. So it's not like there's a big learning curve coming in to the NFL compared to some of the other receivers in that conference. Well, I guess it was, both conferences, Pac-12 and Big 12. Regardless, I personally will have to see it with my own 2 eyes. So I am a little lukewarm on this pick overall, but I agree with all the things that you said. There is an upside possibility here, which is really, really fun and really special. And it's another sign that I think Kyle Shanahan's going to open up his offense, be more pass first, and be a little bit more spread out moving forward. And that's an exciting possibility as well.
This guy's small, but this guy's not weak. You know what I mean?
No. He's ripped.
He's ripped. He's strong. He's tough.
He's got that dad strength, Larry.
Yeah, he looks good. He looks good. I think he's going to be a nice player.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the pick that I hated. And maybe it sounds like maybe you liked it. So I hope you do. Because I
kind of came along on it. Yeah.
So the Niners at 215, round 6, take Jared Kingston, 6'4", 306-pound offensive lineman, played a full career at Wazoo, transferred to SC for his final year. He was a 6-year player.
Yeah.
He's got short arms. He's
Yep.
considered a solid tactician in pass protection.
Yep.
As I said, 6-year college player. He's played left tackle, right tackle, left guard, right guard. I think he kind of projects on paper to be a center. Maybe I'm wrong there.
No.
The scouting reports that I heard and read say that he lacks power.
Mhm.
This year, he had 12 starts at left guard, 1 at left tackle. He is plenty strong. He did 36 reps on the bench.
Yeah.
And it looks like he's got decent foot speed. He was born in Northern California, went to Anderson High School, which I've never heard of Anderson High School.
I don't know where Anderson. I thought that too. I'm like, where in Northern California is Anderson? Let us know in the comments.
I don't know where Anderson High School is, but he was a D lineman in high school. And he also did track. He threw the discus, then spent 5 seasons at Wazoo. And then, he lost a year to an injury, transferred to SC, played right tackle and right guard at SC. He's married. They say he processes things very quickly, so he's a smart player. To me, I mean, you had Jerry Rice's kid, not that you needed another receiver, but you had a bunch of good football players on the board.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like, hey, is this guy going to even make the team? Is this guy going to beat out Zakel? Is he going to beat out Jalen Moore? Is he going to beat out Burford? Is he going to beat out these guys? I mean, they're going to take their 5 starters, then they're going to take Puni, and you've got, Feliciano's one of the starters, and Burford's on the bench. That's Puni and Burford. Most teams only go with 8, sometimes 9, so there's only a couple more spots. Yeah. Zakel is one of the backups. He's Purdy's best friend and roommate. Are you going to cut?
Well, Nick did get married, so I'd imagine they kicked him out of the house by now.
Yeah, they might have kicked him out, but maybe he's got a Cato Kalin pad in the back. But either way, I mean, the Niners have, some depth at the offensive line spots that is not going to make it easy for Kingston to make the roster. Yeah. What do you think? I mean, what are you hearing? Why do you like him?
He moves. This guy is smooth as a mover. And again, we talked about this with Puni, and we talked about this with a lot of 49ers offensive linemen. They value foot speed and accuracy with steps. And that doesn't necessarily mean that guys don't have phantom steps and things like that, but they want somebody who can push the pile forward, that can be the attacker against a defense. They want to be the aggressor on offense on the offensive line. And even in pass pro, they want to be the aggressor. And to do that, you have to have great feet. This guy is smooth. This guy can scoot. And I highly recommend anyone watch USC play Notre Dame this past year. They moved him around. He was at guard. They pulled him and pinned him at everything. And he was laying dudes out. His issue is that he does not play with the tenacity and meanness that he clearly has. If he had that going on with his strength, he wouldn't have been in the 6th round, not with his movement ability. The other thing that really hurt him is the fact that he played at USC. Much like Garendo going to Louisville was not a smart transfer decision. He would have been better off staying at Washington State. You go to USC, and they might have been the worst coach team in the country this year. I don't know what they were doing on the offensive line. And in fact, I painted with a very broad brush anytime someone would ask me about Caleb Williams, or if I had to say something nice about the guy, and clearly he has all the physical talent in the world. But if I had to say something nice, I'd say, well, his offensive line sucked. And it did. When I watch back the tape, now looking for Kingston, one of the reasons I overlooked him and missed him in the first place, because I said, well, USC's offensive line sucked, like aggressively. One of the things in life that I knew more than anything else is that all those offensive linemen sucked, and I didn't want any of them. And now having to watch back and watch Kingston, he was the only one who was doing his job. He was the only one they could run behind. He was the only one who could pass protect. I agree that there is a lot of risk here because, again, the short arms, I think he's a guard. He might be a center. I think he's very similar to Puni. He is a fluid mover. I think he understands angles very well. Not that he was ever put in a position to get an angle on anybody with the 3.5-yard splits they were doing at USC. Just a disgusting coaching job. Lincoln Riley, come on, get the hell out of here. I'm still PO'd about it. I think this kid has a chance to really impress. There's a lot of guys on this list that the Niners took that should be better pros. than they were college players because their traits and their skill sets better translate to a tighter, more physical, more mental game at the NFL level. I think Kingston might be at the top of that list. If it's ever going to work for him, it's going to work for him at the NFL level because, again, this guy can scoot and he has the mobility that the 49ers love. And I think that he is just tenacious enough that if you tap into something deeper, he could be really, really, really good. I'm not a big Nick Sakelj guy in general. I'm not a big Jalen Moore guy in general. He'll have to beat him, and we'll see. We'll see, because there's a lot of warts on the game that you can say he's not going to make it. I was shocked they took him in the 6th round. Shocked. Even more so than taking Cowing in the 4th, which shocked me as well. Yeah, I had to do a lot of research on the guy, but I watching him move and watching the coaching malpractice that was done to him at USC, and I think he's pretty good in pass pro, and I think he's a really good run blocker. I think Chris Forrester, now he'll be coached for the first time possibly in his entire life, because I don't know how the offensive line coach at Anderson High School, south of Reading, is doing, but I can't imagine that's some high-level stuff. Apologies to any folks from suburban Reading. Like, this guy's about to get a PhD in run blocking from the master and Chris Forrester. And a year from now, if this guy's as smart as they say he is, they could be looking really, really smart by having him. Or he might not be on the team and they put him on the practice squad after a year.
Very interesting. They take a couple guards. They get a center in Drake Nugent. They don't get a tackle.
That's right. No tackles.
Tackle. The final pick in the draft was Tatum Bethune.
Yeah.
When they worked him out, I guess, last week, or there was a report of that last week. He goes number 251, linebacker, once again, Florida State.
Love Florida State.
7th round pick. I love him because he's just always around the ball. And he's a short linebacker. It's funny in the NFL, it's like you got to be in their height, weight, speed windows. And if you're not, you're going to be pushed back. And I think that's what happened here. This guy can play. 5'11", 227, roughly 230, 10-inch hands, born and raised in Miami. Father was a safety at Florida A&M in the early 90s. Started playing football, Tatum did, at the age of 5. Went to Miami Central High School, played defensive end and linebacker, 3-star high school recruit. And then he followed Randy Shannon to Central Florida. Randy Shannon, the former Hurricane linebacker, and then transferred after 3 years to Florida State, also to follow Randy Shannon. He's an academic all AAC person. He graduated with his degree, 3 years at Central Florida, and then he went to Florida State. Team captain at Florida State, team leader, explosive blitzer, had 26 quarterback pressures over the past 2 seasons, 16 reps on the bench, which is not a lot, but he's got special teams experience. But what I love about him more than anything, this guy's a violent hitter.
That's right.
Violent hitter.
He has murder in his heart, Larry.
Yeah, this
guy's
guy's
out to kill.
He's out to destroy. And he gives great effort. And he's a practice, he's a guy the coaches are going to love because he plays 1,000,000 miles an hour practice.
They're going to have to pull him back.
And, 61 games over the last 5 seasons. And I just think he processes things fast. So he's in the right spot. His downside, from what I can tell, is he's not really a form tackler at all. He's just a pure hitter. But he can cover the tight end. He played weak side linebacker. He played the will in Florida State's 4-2-5. 339 career tackles, 28 career tackles for loss.
Yeah.
So this guy's just really productive. And when you watch him, he's just really quick at 5'11", 230, and just constantly around the ball.
Instinctual.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, this is, if this guy were 6'2", he would have probably gone in the 4th round.
No doubt.
And said he's 5'11", but he's always around the ball in a really fast defense where there's a lot of guys flying around. He's noticeable. So I love Kalen DeLoach, and I think he's an incredible sub-package linebacker. But Tatum Bethune is a nice backer as well, and I think he's going to give Graham and Winters and Flanagan fouls. I mean, the competition at that spot for, they'll probably go with 5 or 6 linebackers. The competition is going to be severe, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if Bethune wind up playing over some guys who are maybe ahead of him right now in that depth chart.
My concern with him is tight hips. Can't swing him open. He can cover the tight end. He didn't really have to face that good of tight ends. And I'd be fascinated to see what he does against NFL caliber tight ends, especially these crazy Uber athletes that they got going on out there. But murder in his heart and a processing ability of the game that is evident and preternatural. You don't play for Florida State, the roles that he played for Florida State, without being all over it when it comes to the game plan, when it comes to the scheme, when it comes to how to play football the right way. There's another guy who's about his size that also had violence in his heart and had a lot of questions going into the draft. And I think it's the guy that he's going to end up replacing. His name was Dre Greenlaw. And you talked about the alphas in the secondary. You also need somebody on the front of your defense, in your front seven, front eight, that's out to kill. That is going to set a tone of physicality from the opening snap. And this guy has that ability. He is the biggest boomer bust situation, because the flip side of it is his mind and his temperament are NFL caliber. And when you get to the NFL, having that stuff is more important than it is at college, where it's just athletes going out there playing basketball on grass. But you're also going up against a higher caliber athlete. And so perhaps, he has an NFL mind. He has an NFL energy to him. But his body cannot do what it is he wants his body to do. He's not that good of he can't play at the level that his brain and his anger are at. And that might get exploited even more at the NFL level. But I'm so interested to see what he brings to the training camp. But specifically, I'm fascinated to see, because I imagine they'll have him out on the field a lot in the preseason, because the 7th round pick, that's what you do with 7th round picks. You play him a lot in the preseason. I think he will look the part. I just don't think that you can teach the kind of football smarts and the kind of the evil that he's got going on. Seems like a nice enough kid, but the evil that he's got going on, I don't think you can teach it. And I think it's something you need. And I think it will overwrite his physical limitations. I don't care about how tall he is. I don't care about, what I care about is the fact that he can't flip his hips open and really cover all that well. You're going to end up in a bad situation if you're in any sort of a zone defense if he's out there. But man, he is going to lay some wood in the run game. And I really, there was a lot of good linebackers in the late rounds that I liked. I didn't like the linebackers in general, but I did like the late round guys. This is a guy that I really liked in the late rounds. And he's a very exciting prospect to me, because if it clicks, it's not some sort of, he's in the rotation, he's somebody good. If it clicks all the way. He's on the field for you all the time. And Dre Greenlaw's going to have a hard time getting his job back. And if it doesn't, you can cut him, because he's 251.
Yeah. Dieter Kurtenbach with us on the Krug Show as we're chopping it up on the Niners, going through pick by pick, everybody they selected in the draft this weekend. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle, the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. Also, thanks to Marin Autoglass, marinautoglass.com on the web. Great company. Thanks to them for sponsoring. Also, thanks to Underdog Fantasy. Check that link in the description. Use the promo code Krug, and they'll match you up to your first $100. And also, thanks to our good friends at Sharp Corners Sports Cards and Collectibles. They are at 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove. Call Anthony Catania, 831-521-5264. And the first Friday of every month, they're doing a little sidewalk deal down there at Pacific Grove, where they're going to have food and beverage out there, and people are going to be walking around and trading collectibles and that kind of thing. And give Anthony Catania a call. He can give you more information on that, but kind of a cool event at Sharp Corners Sports Cards and Collectibles. Okay. So we've gone through the draft picks, and we're going to go through the undrafted guys here in just a second. Why don't we hit a couple of these supers? You'll do the reading for me, because my eyes are bad right now. Corey Wallace jumps in. It's not necessarily a super, but he has a good one here.
Yeah, Lombardi has never said the Niners did anything wrong ever. Okay. Maybe not. I don't know. Shanny admits more mistakes with Niners than the spreadsheet. I presume this is David Lombardi's spreadsheet.
Oh, okay. Let's leave Lombardi alone. Lombardi does a good job. Lombardi does a good job.
Well, this guy, 49ers throwback, agrees with you, Larry. He did not like the Jarrett Kingston pick. And listen, I think there's plenty of reasons to be skeptical of it. No one saw this guy coming. I put myself at the front of that list. But when you watch him, he can really move. Both wide receivers living in the same state as Brock. It's a coincidence? Probably, but I like it. I can tell you this, Kyle Shanahan does not care for the Phoenix, Arizona area. If you've ever talked to him about the COVID year where they had to live, he goes to a deep, dark place that he never wants to return to. So I do think it's a coincidence. But again, I'll say this. It's going to be really easy to get some work in the offseason with those guys.
Travis throws a couple bucks for this comment.
Yeah. That's the Brock wide receiver comment in Arizona.
Born. He says, what? Both wide receivers live in the same state as Brock. Is that a coincidence? I don't know. I don't know if it is. Maybe Brock gave his advice. Who knows?
Well, I guess these guys played at rival high schools too. Zero Keach, won, threw us $5 for this. Congratulations, Larry. I don't like the Pearsall pick, but fine. If you're going to take him, why not trade back? Taking him at 31 is insane. No, it isn't, because look at the wide receiver run that happened immediately after him. And if they valued him over all the other wide receivers, it went Carolina traded up to 32 to get a wide receiver.
The next 4 of the first 5 picks in round 2 were wideouts, weren't they?
If there was anything that happened in this draft, it was that teams were very bespoke, right? They weren't using public consensus, anything like that. They had their boards. They were sticking to them. That's something the 49ers have done year in and year out. They don't care about the outside noise. They don't. And the truth is going to happen on the field at training camp and in the regular season. But beyond that, man, when one guy went, they all went. There was runs on cornerbacks. There were runs on defensive tackles. There were runs on running backs. Every position had a run. It started off with a run on quarterbacks. So no, you could have gotten cute and said, oh, we'll get Pearsall in 4 or 5 picks. And then thank God we have this extra 4th round pick. But here's what could have happened. Now you don't get the guy that you loved. And oh, great. You at least have that 4th round pick to keep you warm at night. Don't overthink it sometimes. Don't get cute with this stuff.
Yeah. Seriously. I kind of agree, because you can outthink yourself. We JAL for $10. What's he saying?
Puni and McKivitz have almost the same measurements, so I don't see why Puni couldn't start at right tackle if he's better. They should also have Nugent and Brendel compete at center. Nugent will compete at center. There's no question about it. There's no backup right now. McKivitz and Puni, yeah, sure. I mean, if Puni's better, they should play him. Of course they should. At the same time, I don't see Puni as a kind of guy who has the foot speed, and they prefer straight line foot speed at tackle compared to McKivitz. I think they really like where McKivitz is at in terms of his fundamentals and where he's at. Now, we all see the liabilities. No one's arguing that Colton McKivitz is some elite player, but they really like where he's at, and they really like the price that he's at. Maybe Puni can take that job from him in the near future, but I much prefer Puni as a guard. And by the way, that is something we said about McKivitz, so maybe you're onto something here, JAL.
Yeah, I like Puni as a guard as well.
MGM Productions here for $5.
Yeah, what's he saying?
I have my dynasty draft tomorrow. Wow, that's some sicko behavior. And I'm in need of a wide receiver. I have the 8 and 11 pick. Who should I target? Ladd McConkey, B. Robinson, Worthy, Coleman, Franklin. That's a good question.
Out of those guys, I mean, I would take Neighbors, but I mean,
I don't think you're getting them at 8 though.
Okay. So let's go through it. Worthy's in Kansas City as a go pattern guy to run off the coverage.
They also have Hollywood Brown there, right? So it's
right, and they've got Kelsey and Pacheco, and they're going to run it. So he's not going to get the ball a lot. Coleman went to
Buffalo.
He's going to probably be their number 1 receiver.
Well, they like a Shakir a lot, and he's probably going to get the number, but he's going to be on the field a lot. That's the thing.
Yeah, and then Franklin wound up where?
Franklin.
Do we know who got Franklin?
He went in the 4th round. Hold on, I'll find him here.
Yeah, I would probably say McConkey. I think McConkey is a lot like Pearsall. I mean, he's going to operate in the middle of the field. He's going to get the ball a lot. He's going to be a continuity piece. He's going to be a chain mover. What team got McConkey again?
McConkey went to the Chargers, so you're getting the best quarterback out of this group. Meanwhile, the Broncos went and got Franklin. Let me see how that fits.
I would say McConkey.
I agree with that. Yeah, because you got Josh Reynolds, who's going to Denver. You still have Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick. you still have good receiver. I mean, Marvin Mims
And
did
you
have
just don't have
moments.
you don't have a quarterback. You're going to maybe have a rookie quarterback.
Well, you got Bo Nix. They got a quarterback. I don't know if he's any good, but they got a quarterback. And
Yeah.
by the way, relationship there, Bo Nix and Troy Franklin. Maybe that's a flyer. I wouldn't take him in a dynasty draft anywhere early, but if you're thinking, hey, I can grab this guy for free, go ahead and do it. I would go with McConkey.
I'd go
All
McConkey
he did was
they're going to go
produce.
play. They're going to go play action pass a lot down there. They're going to run it a ton, and then they're going to go play action pass. And Herbert's going to be looking for the guy who's open, and McConkey's going to be open. I think McConkey might be a great fantasy receiver for everybody next year.
Agreed.
We got this one from MGM.
Yeah, besides Garendo, what other deep sleeper should I pick up for UDFA? I presume this is for the fantasy draft. So top 40. Oh, a deep cut.
What undrafted free agent wide receivers?
Well, I think this is an undrafted free agent in his dynasty fantasy football league where they're just taking rookies. And I'll go back to the Chargers. Kamani Vidal, my guy. That was my favorite running back in the draft. It took a little bit earlier than I thought he would be. 297 carries last year for Troy. Didn't fumble one time in 4 years. Jim Harbaugh football team. I think Kamani Vidal, if you can get him for free in a dynasty league, I think everyone's going to be clamoring for him about halfway through the season because it's not as if that depth chart is of any competition for him. I love Kamani Vidal, and I very much hope I'm right because I've stuck my neck out for him too many times to count now. But yeah, you got J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and Isaiah Spiller.
Is that the running back? I mean, I would go Malik Washington.
That's a good option.
Malik Washington was just so productive. I know he went to Miami, I think, right? But they've got other guys. But
they'll put him in the slot there. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's just so productive. I mean, he's been nothing but productive in college. So
that's a great call. I like
kind of like him.
He might get drafted in this dynasty draft that now I'm thinking about way too hard, though.
Malik Washington. We got this one from Michael. What's Michael saying here?
Michael says, fun fact, great X3 aunt is Mary McLeod Bethune. So his great aunt to the third degree is Mary McLeod Bethune. And Larry, I'm not going to lie to you here. I have no idea who Mary McLeod Bethune is.
Probably related to the linebacker that just came to the Niners.
Oh yeah, I think that is the insinuation. I'm now going to Google, luckily in a private room in my home, who Mary McLeod Bethune is. This is going to be
she on the main stage.
She was an American educator and philanthropist. I presume had something to do with Bethune-Cookman University, which makes it all the more ironic that his father played at Florida A&M.
Exactly.
I thought that was kind of weird that a guy named Bethune played for Florida A&M. Now it's even weirder.
By the way, we were talking about Cowing before.
Yeah.
Cowing in his last 2 college games. Yeah. One was the Territorial Cup against ASU. 9 catches, 157 yards, and a touchdown. The bowl game against Oklahoma, you remember Arizona pulled the upset there this year. Yeah. 7 for 152 and 2 touchdowns against the Sooners. My God, Jacob Cowing had 16 catches for 300 plus yards and 3 touchdowns in his last 2 college games.
But Larry, it's against Big 12 and Pac-12 defenses, which
Oklahoma no-showed that bowl game, but still.
I'm just saying, like, my concern with those conferences with wide receivers is that guys just got to do whatever they wanted because defense doesn't exist in those leagues outside of Texas. Like Oklahoma's defense, even with Brett Venables, was a joke, especially in the secondary. And Arizona State, everybody quit.
People were billing Brent Venables like he was freaking Buddy Ryan and Bill Belichick all rolled into
I'll say this, Brent Venables is doing a better job than Lincoln Riley would have done because I saw what Lincoln Riley did at USC with all the money in the world, and no, I do not care for that. Lincoln Riley is going to make one hell of an analyst for some college football team next year.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the undrafted free agents. And this a lot of people, there's a lot of people have been walking around, especially in radio land, saying, all that really matters is the first round. And well, first of all, that's obviously crap because the greatest quarterback of all time was a 6th round pick. Brock Purdy was Mr. Irrelevant. He's the hottest thing in football right now. We could name Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, Azeez Al-Shaair.
Half the guys in the league were undrafted free agents.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of undrafted free agents out there. So the bottom line is, even though the draft used to be 12 rounds,
That's right.
now it's 7.
Probably
But
should go back
even
to 12.
though it's 7 rounds and these personnel people are really smart and they're looking at every single guy, the undrafted guys, every year, there's always undrafted free agents that wind up in camp and wind up playing well and sometimes wind up playing great and sometimes wind up being Pro Bowlers.
That's right.
So you got to take a look at the undrafted guys. The Niners list is specifically interesting because they have hit on undrafted free agents more so than they've hit on their first round picks. Think about that for a second. The Niners have had a better run of undrafted free agents than they've had with first rounders in this regime. And we think that Lynch and Shanahan are pretty smart.
They stick to their scheme with undrafted free agents. There's no risk, so they're willing to take the possible rewards of a guy who would fit what it is they do. When it's in the first round, they need this consensus and they need to feel like they're going to be viewed as smart by everybody else. And they go away from what is tried and true everywhere else in the draft. And they overthink it. They get cute, which is why I'm so happy they took Pearsall. And everyone hates it right now. If you want to sell the stock, give it to me, because I'm telling you, They stuck to their guns for the first time in the first round in a long time, and I think it's going to pan out in a big way. But these undrafted guys, interesting names on the list.
Well, and I'm so glad you're here because people don't know this, but Big Dieter over here went to University of Missouri. He's a Missouri Tiger.
I'm a Tiger through and through, baby.
Yes, and once gave me a great pizza recommendation that I passed to my brother, whose kid was considering going to Missouri, and you recommended a pizza place, and they went there and they said it was fucking amazing.
Shakespeare's, baby.
Yeah, they you know your pizza.
Well,
I said,
think
hey
anyone
man,
who's
this
ever
comes from
seen me
Dieter.
knows that.
This comes from Dieter, and Dieter knows Missouri, and they loved it. So he chose Gonzaga. I didn't choose Missouri, but he loved Shakespeare's pizza.
Well, we can't be right all the time.
But let's talk about, I'm glad you're here because one of the guys that, to me, the Niners, they signed they have like 6 or 7 open roster spots. So they're going to sign 6 or 7 undrafted free agents. And they came up with a list, and it's a non-official list because one year LeGarrette Blount was on the Niners list and he went to Tennessee the next day. So some of these guys do back out in the 11th hour. So don't go celebrating
until the contract is signed and until they walk through the doors. This is fluid.
It's a fluid situation, but there are 3 names on the list that I think are very, very interesting. And one of them is the running back from the University of Missouri, and his name is Cody Schrader.
Yeah.
And Schrader had an amazing year this year. And he's another guy that I was talking about. I was talking about Garendo maybe bulking up and being the fullback. There's a chance that this guy could, if he wanted to, put on a few extra pounds, and he could be their undersized fullback. He was an incredible talent to watch this year. Then he went to Mobile, and he looked good in Mobile. He wasn't like he got outclassed in Mobile with all those great athletes. He's a running back from the University of Missouri. He's a white kid who's about 5'10", 215 pounds, maybe closer to 220. But he had a tremendous year, and I think he's a really good football player. I think he's definitely an NFL 53-man roster player for sure. Yeah. And the Niners signed him today, or at least are in line to sign him as a undrafted free agent. Tell us about Schrader and how you think he fits here. Because now they suddenly got a ton of backs.
Let's refer to him by his proper title, which was the best running back in the SEC last year. And it wasn't even particularly close. Cody Schrader went for 1,600 yards on 276 carries on a Missouri team that had an exceptional defense, some pretty good offensive players, but what they had was Cody Schrader, and they ended up winning the Cotton Bowl. And in that Cotton Bowl, there was nothing. There was nothing except for Cody Schrader, 29 carries, 128 yards. Every single one of them earned hard. He had a 205-yard game against Tennessee, went for 217 against Arkansas. This is a one-cut-and-go kind of guy. Doesn't have these sort of measurables that you'd love. I get why Isaac Garendo is a lot of the same shape. It's a lot of the same skill set. Garendo just is much, much faster. But here's the thing with Cody Schrader.
This kid's all heart, though. Cody Schrader's all heart.
And it's going to be difficult to see him as a primary running back in the NFL. But if you need 3 yards, have I got a guy for you? Because you're not bringing him down. He just wants it more. This is a guy who started his career at Truman State in the middle of Missouri and walked on to the University of Missouri football team and worked his way up from 11th on the depth chart to be the best running back in the SEC, probably the best running back in college football last year. Should have been a Heisman Trophy finalist, came just short of that. When you think about the 49ers running back room depth right now, it's obviously Christian McCaffrey one. And before you bring in Garendo and before you bring in Schrader, it was Elijah Mitchell and J.P. Mason. Kyle Shanahan does not trust J.P. Mason. I think he's a nice special teamer. I like him as a running back, but it's Kyle's call. And they can't trust Elijah Mitchell because he can't stay on the field.
Well, he's got a big man's game. He's got a small man's body. He runs upright between the tackles. He takes.
But they want that big man's game. They want somebody who is going to be able to run between the tackles and just hold on to the damn football and give us the yards that we need, control the clock, control the game, take a little bit of the soul of the other team. And Cody Schrader was out there taking souls all year round. When he would go up against the best defenses, he carried it 22 times for 112 yards against Georgia. When they shut down everybody, including Luther Burden, who's going to be a first-round pick next year, they shut him down in that game between the hedges, but they could not stop Cody Schrader. And the storyline after that game wasn't, whoa, Georgia won again. It was a close game. It was tight. The storyline out of that game is that Schrader guy is awesome.
What runs does he like to run? Because I've seen him run to the edges, but he
likes to run off the left tackle specifically. Okay. Gets to left tackle. If you can, they had a really nice blocking tight end at Mizzou this past year. He had a long name, and again, it's late. I've run out of bandwidth, but he likes to run to the left side. And again, it's one cut and go. And when he goes, it's surprising. He catches defenses by surprise, and it takes more than one guy to bring him down. I think he has a real shot to be running back 3 on this team, and that they punt Mason because they've made a lot of improvements on special teams where Mason is very important as a gunner. And so they have a lot of guys who can do that now. So you're now having to look at J.P. Mason almost strictly because his true value to the team in special teams is sort of diluted with all the great special teamers they've brought in this offseason, both in free agency and the draft. Now you have to look at him strictly as a runner. And while I like him, I like Cody Schrader more. Again, I'm biased, Larry. Cody Schrader was the man for a team that
in the best conference in the country.
He was the offense. A lot of times.
Oh, and he looked good in the All-Star games. I mean, the Niners have added 2 really exciting backs. One that does it for the stopwatch in Garendo, who's a freak. 220, and he runs in the 4.3s, low 4.3s. Right. And then this kid Schrader, who's all heart. Yeah. I think if you told me that Schrader showed up in camp and was a revelation in the preseason,
it's going to be, if they want to cut him,
I wouldn't think twice of it.
They are going to have a very, very, very hard time cutting Cody Schrader, right? And when you come in as an undrafted free agent, the presumption is you're going to get cut. It will be the last day of camp, and they are going to have to waffle one way or another on if they keep this guy or not. Let me tell you about the Tennessee game where he carried it 35 times for 205 yards. He also caught it 5 times for 116. Now, he's not a great pass catcher. One game. Absolutely ran over number 13 Tennessee, who had some defensive players. I don't know how I feel about Tennessee as an overall operation, but he was everything. He was everything for Missouri. And again, this was one of the best teams in college football, and he was their son. It was a heliocentric system around Cody Schrader. Heart and soul, going to give you the tough carries, scored touchdowns in damn near every game, 3 against LSU, 2 against South Carolina. He was the constant presence and constant excellence. They created themselves a problem by bringing him in, because if they want to cut him, they're going to have to kill a couple of coaches in order to do it.
You may see a trade. Because
I think that they're going to cut Elijah Mitchell and J.P. Mason probably very early. I would imagine they do it this summer. I don't think they even bother bringing him to camp.
Very interesting. Somebody of note is going to go. JP,
no question.
Mitchell, Juszczyk. I don't know if Juszczyk's going to go this year, but
yeah, I don't know about the fullback potential for a Schrader, but I'll tell you this: he'll give it a try.
Yeah,
if you ask him to do it, he'll do it. He'd play linebacker for you. This guy, you want to talk about a love of the game of football?
Oh, I know.
I gave you the story. This guy wants it. He wants it more than anyone, and he's got that cockiness too. Don't get me wrong. when he proves it, he lets you know. I love Cody Schrader.
He's a good back. He's a really good back. I'm
And
really
now he's gonna
shocked.
be pissed that no one drafted him.
I'm shocked that nobody drafted him. I really am. I am shocked after the year that he had in that conference and the attention that he got late in the year. Yeah. Okay, so undrafted free agent number 2. So Schrader's number 1 in my mind. It's like, wow, look at this guy. Then there's Evan Anderson. This was a really interesting defensive line draft in that there was a bunch of defensive linemen that went early. And then all of a sudden it was really, really thin. And you looked at that group late, Crumedy and Evan Anderson, and you're thinking, are these guys going to get drafted? Are they going to be undrafted? Well, they get Evan Anderson as an undrafted free agent out of Florida Atlantic. And this guy is just a freaking load. And
he's a
I wonder if he'll make the team. I mean, really, really strong at the point of attack, monster, quick, very quick, huge. And we're talking about maybe 6'1", but like 325, 335 in that range.
He's true 0 or 1 technique player.
Yeah, this guy
don't have one of those.
Real big body inside. But he's intriguing because there's movement ability there, and it's not like he's just a total, he's not like he's just some total raw piece of clay. He's a guy who can move his feet at that size. So what do you think? Does he have a chance to fight for a job, or what's your guess there?
Just because he is that size, I think they're going to give him a fair shake. I really wanted to love him. I used to cover FAU. I still have good connections at FAU. They talked to me about him. I really wanted to love him. You put on the tape and it's just size. I mean, I can appreciate your analysis that he can move well. I don't see it translate. I just don't think that he played strong enough. I saw him get stood up way too many times. And yes, he's getting a lot of double teams and this and that. I think he is a great flyer to bring in. And maybe he is a guy who, because people liked him. People liked him down there at FAU. Maybe he's a guy who gets to the pros and it just clicks for him. And that sounds ridiculous, but there are a lot of guys like that. This is why half the league is undrafted free agents. They're better suited for the pro game than not. But I could not pound the table for him to get drafted. And just the issues that I saw in terms of him getting stood up a lot, not playing a strength that wasn't commensurate to his weight. Just pretty concerning stuff. But again, a defensive tackle draft that had a lot of explosion, a lot of great athletes, but not a lot of loads. And something I advocated for all offseason, especially during free agency for the 49ers, is your run defense fell apart at the end of the season. And you play these wide splits. Maybe we tighten it up a little bit and let's go with the true nose tackle. Let's go with the true, even a nose guard. Like, let's go with somebody who can take on 2 guys at once. And Evan Anderson does have the physical.
He can do that. Yeah.
He could do that. Now, can he win? I don't know, but it's a good start because there's not a lot of guys on this Niners team, if any, that you feel like, oh, they can take on 2 guys at once. Yeah. And so, that's a good start for him. He'll stand a chance. I think that he won't be an immediate cut. But I cannot, I have a hard time seeing him make an NFL roster on anything other than practice squad. And even then, it might look really rough once he gets to the NFL level.
Yeah, I kind of think you're right. The third guy and the last guy we'll discuss is a guy that I have been pounding the table for 2 months.
Yeah.
And I don't remember exactly how I stumbled on this guy, but Mason Pline, who started his career at Ferris State as a basketball, baseball, football player. And then I'm watching, I think somebody said he was a sleeper in some draft podcast or something like that.
There were a lot of sleepers at tight end because it was like 5 good guys and then everyone else was a 7th round pick.
So I YouTube Mason Pline and I'm watching basketball video. And I'm like, well, wait a second. No, I'm looking for Mason Pline, the football player. Then I realized this is the same guy.
That's right.
And at Ferris State, this guy looked like the Ferris State version of Aaron Gordon. I mean, he's playing above the rim. He's running the break. He's catching lobs. He's throwing them down. He had one reverse. He caught the ball in air and reversed it. And I'm looking at this guy. I'm going, well, you know what? That's plenty of athleticism. I mean, the athleticism to reverse jam on the break in basketball. If you have that level of athleticism, you have enough athleticism to play tight end in the NFL if you're strong enough. So then I start reading about this kid. I'm like, wow, if he's an above the rim basketball player, so he's a pretty proven athlete in my mind. Then he transfers to Furman, and he gets his degree in mechanical engineering. Anybody who knows, I mean, last year Jack Coletto, who they got as an undrafted free agent, who Juice told me was the smartest football player he's ever been around his entire life.
That's right.
He was a mechanical engineering major. And I asked Jack Coletto, I'm like, what's your greatest strength? He's like, well, I'm smart enough I can remember all the plays, all the variations of the plays, everything. I've got to, I can digest the playbook really quickly. So this guy, also mechanical engineering major, basketball jamming, high rise type athleticism, 10 and a quarter inch hands.
Yeah.
So he's got these monster hands.
Yeah.
Then I looked at his receiving numbers and they were really good at Furman. So
that's right. Threw him a lot of jump balls.
He's a receiving tight end. He's probably not an inline blocker. He's a 6'8" tight end who's about 255, 260 pounds in there. But he is a high riser with gigantic hands who's really, really smart. And to me, when you check all those boxes, I'm interested, and I would be interested. And then I watched his film. He catches the ball naturally, plucks it with his hands.
Great athlete.
I think the Niners really got a sleeper here in Mason Pline. And I was watching as the draft was going on, and I was thinking to myself, well, they're not taking a tight end. Maybe they'll grab my guy Mason Pline. But I thought, what are the odds of that, right? I mean, it's got to be pretty low. And sure enough, they signed Mason Pline. And to me, this might be an unbelievable steal because this guy is not a blocker. He's a receiver, but he's a big target receiver who's smart with great hands. Huge hands.
The upside of him is that he's a much bigger, more talented Ross Dwelley, more athletic Ross Dwelley. And the 49ers, for whatever reason, for the last 3 years have said, Ross Dwelley, you're our backup tight end. And my concern is that big body and the way that he catches the football, right? It's a lot of boxing out. It's a lot of just getting in front of a guy who's smaller than him. The ball goes up, he pulls it down. Nothing wrong with that. It's just to say that there's not a lot of nuance to his game. And my concern is that his frame and being a number 2 tight end, you got to have the ability to block. And I didn't see the sort of football tenacity when I watched Furman, which is a sentence I can't believe I'm saying out loud. But when I watched Furman and I watched Mason Pline, because again, he was a guy that folks really loved the athleticism. They go, hey, there's a lot of guys. I mean, not to go full Antonio Gates or, Tony Gonzalez or anything here but there's been a nice pipeline, even at the lower levels. The Chiefs always have a guy who played college basketball as the backup tight end to Kelsey. They always want that.
Didn't Denver have a guy from Portland State a few years ago?
I mean, they're just plucking dudes who never played football to do that. So I can see it. I do question, given the need that the Niners have, like Mason Pline would be a great option as a third tight end. Somebody who you can spend some time with, even get on the practice squad, call him up if you need him in a pinch. George Kittle goes down. At least you have that receiving option that you can trust, but you teach him football for a year, give him some really high-level coaching, and now we're going to have some fun. With their needs, which is like all the tight ends other than George Kittle, I don't see how you can take on a project of this magnitude because his game just seems to me to be so limited. If he could block better, if he would run over the middle better. But right now, this is just a dude who I think the only way he can get on the field is you're at the 5-yard line. It's third down. He needs to put an ass in a safety and you throw the ball towards the crossbar and he goes up and gets it because no one else can. That's a nice skill to have. Don't get me wrong. But for this 49ers team with all the needs that they have, I thought there were some. I thought Thomas Yasmin out of Utah would have been a better project for him because he provided more at the baseline with a lot of the upside that you like from Pline as well as a former rugby player going to the tight end position instead of the basketball player going to tight end. But again, another guy that I'm really interested to see because as much as we love to watch the college tape and analyze it, you put this guy out there with the best athletes in the world, and he might look the part. And then you just got to teach him how to actually hit his spots on the floor. But if he's got the talent, they're going to figure out a way to make it happen, especially with their tight end depth. So I gotta see this guy in person, because another thing you got to consider is the level of talent he was getting in the SoCon. Like, pretty easy to box out safeties in the SoCon, Larry.
It's funny. They asked Kyle Shanahan about, hey, so, looking at your depth chart, they've got George Kittle, they've got Braden Willis, they got Cam Latu.
They do.
They've got Sauburn, Eric Sauburn.
Yeah, he's their number 2 tight end right now.
And then they've got Jake Tongues from Cal, who I don't even really consider on the roster. He's just he's just a practice squad there.
Yeah.
Guy in the room. But I mean, Shanahan was asked, hey, is Cam Latu your number 2 tight end? He's like, no, he hasn't been out here practicing. So I get the sense that they're maybe not so happy with Cam Latu.
Well,
Willis,
the fact is
like
they found an injury for Cam Latu. They told Cam Latu to go home for a year. So no, they were not happy with Cam Latu, and anyone who was at training camp could see why.
I think he's going to be worlds better, because I think there's a lot of mental that goes into playing tight end in the Niner offense. I think he was just he was thinking too much. He just needs to learn. Now, how much did he learn from year 1 to year 2? We don't know.
Didn't learn anything on the field.
If he doesn't look a whole lot better, he'll be cut in the first cuts. I guess there's just one cut. But I mean, he'll be cut this year.
Yeah, they'll tell him that he can go start looking for a trade or something, and then
but I mean, the Niners are still relatively naked here. I think for Pline, if you're Pline, you got to love the way this looks. You got Kittle, Braden Willis, Latu, Tongues, and Saubert. I mean, if you have any confidence at all, you got to believe that you can compete with those guys. Considering 2 of those guys make the roster,
and and probably, you have to probably carry 3, and Braden Willis is going to be around. I think they like Willis, so Willis didn't perform on the field all that well. I don't think they're ready to elevate him beyond TE3. But you want to talk about a trade, there's your position. If you need to bring somebody in, don't be trading Elijah Mitchell for some, 6th-round draft pick next year. Trade him for a tight end that another team doesn't want. Just have another dude.
Sign one. Maybe isn't the guy who was with the Packers and Bears, isn't he still out there?
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, let me see who the tight end free agents are.
I think there's some decent tight end free agents, and they may want to explore that, just to take a look at what's out there, because there's probably somebody out there that's better than what they have.
You got Logan Thomas, Robert Tunyon, who you were referencing there. He would be a good option. Somehow Mercedes Lewis is still in the National Football League. Guess what? They could always re-sign Ross Dwelly. He's still a free agent.
Which they may. It's funny. I was talking to Greg Papa the other day, and Papa brought that up, that they may re-sign Ross Dwelly. So they obviously like Ross Dwelly.
I'll give you a name. I mean, it's not Tyler Croft. It's Blake Bell, the Belldozer.
The Belldozer for Kansas
Columbia,
City.
Missouri's own. Then he went to Oklahoma and broke all of our hearts. Apparently, David Wells, former Yankees pitcher, is a tight end that's available as well, according to this chart.
I like Tanyan of that group.
No question.
All right, let's read 2 last supers, and we'll bolt for the door here.
Right.
We got this one.
We got Greg. The greatest QB of all time was not a 6th-round pick, Larry. He was a 3rd-round pick. What the hell? Joe Montana is the GOAT. Come on, dude. Well, I love to forget the last 7 years of NFL history, too.
The one thing is, Joe was awesome, right? Joe was the original. But Brady went to more than twice as many Super Bowls.
That's right.
Come on, you got to give Brady for the longevity. Just for the longevity, you got to give.
Michael comes in saying, does Cowing and Pearsall replace Ayuk and Debo eventually? Pearsall is going to replace Debo eventually, and Brandon Ayuk's about to sign a 5-year contract for a tremendous amount of money. No one's replacing him. Eventually, they'll be well beyond Cowing if they need to replace Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk's not getting replaced anytime soon, so I don't think it's the guy they just took in the 4th round who's going to do the job. But Pearsall's replacing Debo Samuel starting in 2025, and maybe even halfway through this season if injuries start adding up. They say, Debo, we're going to go with the other guy.
Well, and don't discount what we saw this weekend. We're not sitting here talking up Garendo and Schrader because we're need something to do on a Saturday night. We like these players. So yes. I think there's a very good chance that those 2 guys get some run at running back, and that McCaffrey gets flexed out a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And maybe he's part of that. Maybe it's Cowing, Pearsall, and CMC that in combination replace Debo.
Yeah.
And Ayuk is going to be here.
But Ayuk's going to be here. I think for anyone who, if this is still something that people have consternation about, Brandon Ayuk will sign his contract. I'll even give you a date. I think it's going to be July 29th. And we can take the over-under on that. But I think Brandon Ayuk signs. I think it's a pretty no-fuss, no-muss situation. I don't think he's built for the diva lifestyle that all these wide receivers want to do. I think he gets the job done. I think the 49ers reward him handsomely, as well they should. He gets the money that he wants. Him and Brock Purdy make beautiful music for the next 6-7 years.
Dude, we have made beautiful music for what is this?
2 hours.
Almost
2 hours.
Exactly
Larry.
2 hours. Hey, you're the best, man. You're absolutely
I love
fantastic.
doing this.
Tell people where they can find you. I know you write for the San Jose Mercury News.
Right.
I know you fill in on KMBR 680 in different time slots.
Yeah.
Where can people hear you next? I think your analysis on the draft going in and tonight, show that you're all over it. Yeah. I'm really appreciative that you spent the time with me tonight to go through this. But give the audience an idea of if they're becoming Dieter fans, where they can consume what you're putting out there this week.
Yeah, follow my my YouTube channel, Dieter Kurtenbach. We do the Daily Dieter podcast. We're going to start getting back into that every day. I spent a lot of time on my Niners podcast, which we're gonna do some rebranding. We got some really good momentum there towards the end, and a lot of positive buzz. And Jake Hutchinson and I, the legendary Jake Hutchinson, Hutch Diesel on Twitter, broke down 49ers for way too many hours leading up to the draft. We're going to keep doing it over the summer, toss in some Giants, toss in some Warriors, all that good stuff. But if you want just sort of a daily dose of whatever my neuroses is, the Daily Dieter podcast, and you can follow me on X or whatever the hell they call it now. It's at Dieter. There's not very many of us, and I killed the other one, so I got at Dieter.
Look at that. The man he owns the word and the name Dieter. At Dieter on X.
Worse, Larry.
Check him out. And then when do you appear next on the radio? Or is it be a guest hit or a fill-in shot?
I'll tell you, Larry.
I'm not sure yet as we're sitting here.
Well, I've done like 14 hours of radio in the last 3 days. So it's the 6th and the 7th of May. I got some Giants post game and Sports Phone KNBR. I encourage everybody, call on in. 808 KNBR is the number. You know it well. We all know it well. And I'll be on the 6th and the 7th. And between now and then, I mean, by the way, we'll be talking on the 7th about the NHL draft lottery, Larry. That's the entire show. But
the Sharks picking
Macklin Celebrini, Larry, get on the hype train now. Hopefully they win it. Regardless, Daily Dieter podcast.
I'll slip from I pass on the NHL. I'll go right into my my film watching on Baylor Shireman for the NBA draft.
Oh man,
I've got a vision on Baylor Shireman.
Luckily, the Warriors don't have a first-round pick this year. They had to send that to Portland, so I don't have to pretend like any of these guys are good.
Oh, my goodness. All right, man. Hey, thanks to you. Thanks to everybody. Great stuff, man. We'll do it again soon. Really
Absolutely.
appreciate you. Thanks to the audience. Thanks to all you guys. Thanks to our sponsors. Have a great night from the Krueger Show. For Dieter, I'm Larry. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get